Lily Collins wasn't like the other kids at her school. Her father worked as the school janitor, and she often found herself running errands for him or cleaning classrooms after hours. She wasn't a star athlete, nor was she involved in any extracurricular activities like her classmates. Instead, she lived in the background, always trying to avoid drawing attention to herself. The other students didn't really notice her unless she was cleaning up their messes, and most of them didn't think much of her. She was just the janitor's daughter. One afternoon, while Lily was busy sweeping the hallway, a group of students gathered outside the music room, laughing and talking. Lily tried to ignore them, continuing with her work, but then something unexpected happened. Ms. Martinez, the music teacher, walked up to the group, overhearing their playful conversation. Without thinking, she turned to Lily and said with a teasing smile, "Hey Lily, why don't you play the violin for us? I bet you're good at it, right?" The students burst out laughing. It wasn't cruel, but it was certainly a joke. The idea of Lily, the janitor's daughter, playing a violin was ridiculous to them. After all, Lily had never shown an interest in music, and she certainly wasn't known for anything artistic. She had always been quiet, focused on her work, and the thought of her standing in front of a class, performing, was too far-fetched for anyone to take seriously. But Lily wasn't someone who gave up easily. She felt the sting of their laughter, but something inside her stirred. Without even thinking, she took a deep breath and nodded slowly. "All right," she said, trying to keep her voice steady. "I'll give it a try." Her words were met with more chuckles and surprised looks, but she ignored them. She didn't need their approval. In that moment, she made a decision. She would prove herself, not to them, but to herself. Ms. Martinez, surprised by Lily's response, quickly walked into the music room and returned with an old violin. It was dusty and worn, the wooden surface slightly chipped in places. It was clear that this violin hadn't been played in years. The bow had frayed edges, and the strings looked stretched and tight. But Lily didn't mind. She accepted the instrument, her fingers gripping it carefully as she held it in place. As she stood there, the room fell silent. The class was watching her, some of them curious, some of them still smirking. Lily took a moment to adjust the violin under her chin, feeling the unfamiliar weight of the instrument. Her heart raced, but she didn't let fear control her. Instead, she focused on the task ahead. At first, the notes were shaky. The violin felt awkward in her hands, and she wasn't sure where to place her fingers on the strings. But with every note, she felt something shift inside her. The music, though far from perfect, was still something real. The more she played, the more the awkwardness began to fade. The students, who had initially been laughing, grew quieter. They could hear the sincerity in her playing, the effort and raw emotion behind each note. It wasn't flawless, but there was something captivating about it. Lily played through her nervousness, focusing only on the violin and the music it produced. She didn't care about the snickers or the stares anymore. All she cared about was playing, and in that moment, the sound of the violin was the only thing that mattered. As she finished the short piece, the room remained silent for a few moments. It wasn't the applause she was seeking, but just the chance to show that she could do something. The students who had mocked her earlier now looked at her with surprised expressions, unsure of what to say. Lily set the violin down gently and glanced around the room, a small but determined smile on her face. Even though they didn't say anything, she knew that the joke was over. And deep down, she knew she had already won. It wasn't about being perfect. It was about proving to herself that she could stand up to whatever came her way. This moment was hers, and nothing could take that away. After her unexpected performance in front of the class, Lily felt both a sense of relief and a spark of something more. The students didn't laugh anymore, and for the first time in a long while, she felt like she wasn't just the janitor's daughter. She was someone who had the power to surprise. She had never picked up a violin before, and yet she had played something that wasn't terrible. It was like a hidden part of herself had come alive in that moment. But Lily didn't celebrate just yet. She knew that this small achievement, though meaningful, was only the beginning. The other students might have been impressed, but that didn't mean they would take her seriously. Still, she couldn't deny the strange thrill that had come from making music. There was something magical about it, something that made her heart race in a way cleaning hallways never did. That night, as she sat in her room, she couldn't stop thinking about the violin. She had borrowed it for only a few minutes, but something about the way it felt in her hands stayed with her. She wanted to play more, to see how far she could take it. She had no formal training and no idea where to begin, but she wasn't about to let that stop her. The next day after school, instead of heading home like she normally did, Lily found herself walking into the local library. The library wasn't far from her school, and it was usually quiet, the perfect place for her to gather her thoughts. But today, it was different. Lily wasn't there for books. She was there for something else. She had seen people practicing music in the library before, and she knew there had to be resources for learning the violin. With a little luck, she might be able to teach herself. She spent hours searching through books and online tutorials, finding basic guides for beginners. She felt a strange sense of excitement in her chest. It was like something inside her had awakened, and she was eager to feed it. There were so many questions she needed answers to. How did the bow actually move? What kind of sound should she expect? What were the finger placements? Back at home that evening, she sat down with the violin her teacher had given her, now set up in her quiet room. With no one around to judge her, Lily let herself experiment. At first, the sounds were sharp and clumsy. Her fingers slipped on the strings, and the bow squeaked awkwardly as it scraped against the violin. But she didn't stop. She kept practicing, determined to make something that resembled real music. Days turned into weeks, and Lily's skills improved little by little. Each night, after doing her homework and chores, she would pick up the violin and practice. Her father, though often tired from his work as the janitor, would sit in the corner of her room, watching her with quiet pride. He never said much, but she could see it in his eyes. He believed in her, even if she didn't always believe in herself. The students at school noticed too. At first, they were hesitant to approach her. After all, she wasn't the same Lily they had once mocked. She had changed. During lunch breaks, some of them would stand outside the music room and listen as she played through simple songs. Lily hadn't expected to have an audience, but it felt good to know that they were finally paying attention for the right reasons. It wasn't long before one of her classmates, a boy named Mark, approached her one afternoon after school. "Hey, Lily," he said nervously. "I heard you play. You're really good. I was wondering if you want to join the music club." Lily's heart skipped a beat. She had never thought about performing or joining something like the music club. It seemed like a big step, one that she wasn't sure she was ready for. But Mark's offer made her realize that maybe this could be more than just a private passion. Maybe she could be part of something bigger. "I'll think about it," Lily replied, her voice softer than usual. She wasn't sure if she was ready to take that step, but for the first time, she felt like it might be possible. The more she played, the more the world seemed to open up. For the first time in a long time, Lily felt like she had a place where she truly belonged. That evening, she looked at the violin in her hands, and instead of seeing a tool for ridicule, she saw a gateway to something she never imagined possible. Lily was no longer just the janitor's daughter. She was a musician in the making. As the days passed, Lily found herself more and more drawn to the violin. What had started as a joke had now turned into a passion that filled her every free moment. Every evening after dinner, she would retreat to her room, the violin tucked under her arm, and lose herself in the music. It wasn't easy. Her fingers still fumbled over the strings, and sometimes the notes didn't come out the way she wanted. But each mistake was a step closer to getting it right. Her father, though exhausted from his long shifts cleaning the school, began to notice the quiet sounds of her practice drifting from her room. Sometimes he would pause for a moment at the door, listening to the hesitant, shaky tunes that seemed to fill the house with an unfamiliar warmth. He never interrupted her. He understood that this was something important to her, something she had chosen for herself. One evening, after finishing his work, he finally came into her room. Lily was seated on her bed, the violin resting in her lap, as she carefully studied the sheet music in front of her. Her father, always a man of few words, gave her a soft smile. "You're doing well, Lily. I can tell. You have a gift." Lily looked up, surprised. She hadn't expected him to acknowledge her playing, especially since he never really talked about music before. She felt a rush of emotion and gave him a small, grateful smile. "Thanks, Dad," she said quietly, her voice barely above a whisper. Her father's words meant more to her than she could express. He had always supported her in his own way, even when she hadn't asked for it. And now, knowing that he believed in her, Lily felt a new sense of determination. She wasn't just doing this for herself anymore. She was doing it for him, too. The next morning, she woke up earlier than usual. She had been practicing so late into the night that she had barely gotten any sleep, but something inside her pushed her to keep going. She decided to focus on learning a new piece, something a little more challenging. She wanted to push herself further and show everyone, including herself, that she could do it. Over the next few weeks, Lily's playing improved drastically. She started to pick up the rhythm of more complex songs, her fingers moving more confidently over the strings. She could feel herself getting better. And for the first time, the music sounded like it was meant to be. It was no longer just noise or random notes strung together. It was something beautiful, something that resonated deep within her. At school, word of Lily's growing skill had spread, but there was still a certain level of disbelief among her peers. They had never expected her to amount to much in music, especially not someone from a family of janitors. But every time Lily played, she proved them wrong. She wasn't just some invisible girl cleaning hallways anymore. She was a force to be reckoned with. One day, while walking down the hall after her last class, she saw Mark again. This time, he wasn't just standing off to the side, watching her. He came up to her with a grin on his face. "Hey Lily," he said, "I heard you're getting really good. How about we jam together sometime? I play the guitar." Lily's heart skipped a beat. Playing with someone else was something she had never even considered. She wasn't sure if she was ready to perform with others, but there was something in Mark's eyes that made her feel like it might be a good idea. He didn't look at her like she was just the janitor's daughter anymore. He saw her for who she was now, a musician with her own talent. "Sure," Lily replied, feeling a little nervous but excited at the same time. "I'd like that." From that moment on, Lily began to practice even harder. She wasn't just learning songs now. She was preparing for a collaboration. She spent hours learning how to sync with Mark's guitar, experimenting with different melodies and rhythms. Every time they practiced together, the music felt like it flowed naturally between them. It was as if the violin and guitar were meant to be played together all along. Lily couldn't believe how far she had come in just a few short weeks. The girl who once only knew how to clean classrooms was now a musician, creating real music with someone who believed in her. She had come a long way from the girl who had been laughed at by her classmates. And the best part was that she knew this was only the beginning. There was so much more to learn, and she couldn't wait to see how far her music could take her. Lily's life was beginning to change in ways she had never expected. A few months ago, she had been just another student, quietly cleaning up after her classmates, trying to stay out of the spotlight. But now, her name was becoming known in the school for something entirely different: her music. It felt strange at first, like she was living someone else's life, but she couldn't deny the sense of fulfillment that came with it. Her sessions with Mark were going well. At first, they had stumbled through a few songs, unsure of how to make their instruments work together. But over time, the awkwardness faded. The violin and guitar started to blend together in ways that felt natural, as if they had always been meant to play side by side. Lily was amazed at how easy it was to create something beautiful when she wasn't alone. Mark was patient, offering tips here and there, but he never pushed her. He saw her for who she was, a fellow musician, not just a janitor's daughter. As their practice sessions became more frequent, Lily felt more confident. She had always doubted herself before, but now she was starting to believe that she had a real place in the world of music. Still, she wasn't ready to perform in front of anyone. Playing in private with Mark was one thing, but the thought of standing in front of a crowd, knowing that people were listening to her, was terrifying. She wasn't sure if she could handle the pressure. But then, one day, everything changed. The music teacher, Ms. Martinez, came to Lily with an offer she hadn't expected. "Lily, there's a talent show coming up," she said. "We're looking for performers, and I think you and Mark could really impress the crowd. What do you think?" The question took Lily by surprise. She had never even considered performing in front of a crowd, let alone in a competition. Her first instinct was to say no, to retreat back into her safe, quiet world. But then she remembered the first time she had played the violin in front of the class, the shock on everyone's faces when they realized that she wasn't just the janitor's daughter. She remembered how much it meant to her when she had proved herself, even if only for a moment. "I'll think about it," Lily replied, her voice unsure but curious. She wasn't ready to commit, but the idea of performing was now something she could entertain. That night, she sat in her room, the violin resting in her lap, and thought about the opportunity. She could feel the excitement building inside her, the same feeling she had when she first picked up the violin. She was ready to take the next step. She wasn't going to back down this time. But more than that, she realized she wasn't doing this for anyone else. She was doing it for herself. The next day, Lily and Mark agreed to perform together at the talent show. They had chosen a piece that was close to Lily's heart, a beautiful, emotional melody that she had been practicing for weeks. It was a challenge, but she was determined to make it perfect. She practiced harder than ever, making sure every note was clear, every movement smooth. It wasn't about impressing anyone. It was about showing herself that she could do it. The day of the talent show arrived, and Lily was a bundle of nerves. Her heart was pounding in her chest as she walked backstage, holding the violin tightly in her hands. Mark was there, his guitar slung across his back, offering words of encouragement. "You've got this, Lily. Just play like we've been practicing." Lily nodded, taking a deep breath. She had practiced countless hours for this moment, and now it was finally here. She wasn't sure what the audience would think, but she knew one thing. She was ready. She stepped onto the stage with Mark, feeling the eyes of the crowd on her. But for the first time, she wasn't afraid. As the music began, she felt the nervousness melt away, replaced by the music that flowed from her heart. The performance was flawless. The violin and guitar came together in perfect harmony, the sound filling the auditorium. Lily couldn't help but smile as she played, her fingers moving confidently across the strings. She had never felt more alive, more in tune with herself. When they finished, the crowd erupted into applause. It wasn't the standing ovation she had dreamed of, but it didn't matter. She had done it. She had played in front of an audience, and it felt amazing. Backstage, Mark gave her a high five. "You were incredible," he said, his voice filled with pride. Lily's heart swelled with happiness. This wasn't just about winning or performing for others. It was about proving to herself that she had the strength to do something she had once thought was impossible. For the first time, Lily didn't feel like the janitor's daughter anymore. She felt like a true musician, ready to take on whatever came next. The days following the talent show were a whirlwind for Lily. Though she hadn't won first place, the applause and recognition she received meant more than any trophy. For the first time, she felt like she had truly made a name for herself, not as the janitor's daughter, but as someone with talent, someone worthy of respect. The validation from her classmates and teachers felt like a weight lifting off her shoulders. It was as if all the years of being invisible, all the time she had been overlooked or dismissed, had been erased in one moment of music. But despite the praise, Lily knew this was just the beginning. She wasn't ready to stop now. She had only scratched the surface of her potential, and she was hungry to learn more. The violin had become her escape, her way of expressing herself in a world that often seemed too loud and chaotic. Every note she played brought her closer to understanding herself and her place in the world. Her teacher, Ms. Martinez, had been watching her closely since the performance. She had seen Lily's progress, and she was eager to encourage her further. After class one day, Ms. Martinez pulled Lily aside. "You know, Lily," Ms. Martinez began, "you have a real gift. You've improved so much in such a short amount of time. I think you could go even further with the right guidance." Lily blushed, feeling a bit embarrassed by the attention, but also proud. "Thanks, Ms. Martinez. I've been practicing a lot." "I can see that," Ms. Martinez replied with a warm smile. "I've spoken to the head of the music department, and they're offering you a chance to audition for the regional youth orchestra. It's a great opportunity to take your skills to the next level. I think you're ready for it." The idea of auditioning for the orchestra was both exciting and terrifying. Lily had never considered playing at such a high level before. She had always played for herself, in the quiet of her room, but the thought of performing with other talented musicians was intimidating. She wasn't sure if she was ready to compete with people who had been training for years. But something inside her told her that she had to try. She had already faced so many doubts, both from others and from herself. This was her chance to prove that she could belong in the world of serious music. "I'll do it," Lily said, her voice a little shaky but determined. "I'll audition." Ms. Martinez smiled again. "I knew you'd say that. I'll help you prepare, and we'll make sure you're ready." For the next few weeks, Lily threw herself into practice with even more focus than before. She was already improving, but now she had a goal. She practiced every day after school, often staying late into the night, poring over sheet music and perfecting her technique. Her fingers ached, but she pushed through the discomfort. She could hear the difference in her playing, how much smoother and more confident it sounded. She was no longer the girl who had fumbled with the violin in front of her classmates. She was becoming a real musician. Mark, who had become her closest friend and practice partner, was incredibly supportive. He would often come by after school to practice with her, offering advice and encouragement. He believed in her more than she believed in herself, and his faith in her kept her going even on the days when she felt like giving up. "You're going to nail this audition," Mark said one afternoon as they practiced a duet together. "I can tell you've got something special. You've got the heart for this." Lily smiled, feeling her nerves calm a little. It meant the world to her that Mark believed in her. He wasn't just the boy who played guitar anymore. He was a friend, someone who had stood by her through all the uncertainty. As the day of the audition drew closer, Lily felt a mix of excitement and fear. She wasn't sure what to expect, but she knew she was ready to give it her all. She had come so far from the shy girl who had once been content to stay hidden in the background. This audition wasn't just a test of her musical abilities. It was a test of everything she had worked for, every hour she had spent practicing, and every moment she had spent doubting herself. The morning of the audition arrived, and Lily found herself standing in front of the building where the orchestra would hold its tryouts. Her heart raced as she stepped inside, violin case in hand. This was it, the moment she had worked for. She took a deep breath, reminding herself that no matter what happened, she had already proven to herself that she was capable of more than she had ever imagined. Lily walked into the audition room with a quiet confidence, ready to show the judges the musician she had become. It didn't matter what anyone else thought. She was going to. The days after Lily's audition were some of the longest she had ever experienced. The moment she had walked out of the audition room, the weight that had settled in her chest seemed to lift. She had given it everything she had, playing her heart out for the judges. She knew she had done her best, but now it was out of her hands. The waiting began, and she could hardly stand it. Lily couldn't stop thinking about the audition. She replayed the performance in her mind over and over, wondering if there had been something she missed, something she could have done better. But at the same time, she knew that no matter the outcome, this experience had changed her. She wasn't the same girl who had stumbled through that first violin performance in front of the class. She had grown so much since then, both as a musician and as a person. During the waiting period, life at school continued as usual. Her classmates didn't bring up the audition, and Lily was thankful for that. She didn't want anyone to know how nervous she was. Instead, she focused on her practice, continuing to perfect her technique, even though the audition was over. Mark kept encouraging her, always reminding her how much progress she had made. "You've already accomplished something huge, Lily," Mark told her one afternoon after school. "You're so much better than you were a few months ago. No matter what happens with the orchestra, you're already a winner." His words helped ease some of the anxiety that had been building inside her. He was right. She had come so far. It wasn't just about the audition anymore. It was about everything she had learned and all the growth she had experienced. A week later, the email came. Lily had been checking her inbox every morning and evening, hoping for some sign that the decision had been made. When the subject line of the email finally caught her attention, she could barely breathe. She opened it quickly, her fingers trembling. "Dear Lily Collins," the email began. "Thank you for auditioning for the Regional Youth Orchestra. We are pleased to inform you that you have been selected for a position in the orchestra." Lily couldn't believe her eyes. She had made it. She had been accepted. The excitement that washed over her was overwhelming. She jumped up from her desk and ran to find her father. When she found him in the kitchen, she couldn't contain her joy. "I did it, Dad. I made it into the orchestra," she exclaimed. Her father looked at her in disbelief, then broke into a wide smile. "I knew you could do it, Lily," he said, pulling her into a hug. "You've worked so hard for this. I'm so proud of you." Tears welled up in Lily's eyes. She had worked so hard for this moment, and now it was finally real. Her father's pride meant everything to her. She had done it, not just for herself, but for him too. All those nights of practicing, all those moments of doubt, it had all led to this. Lily couldn't wait to share the news with Mark. She found him later that day, and as soon as she saw him, she couldn't help but smile. "I made it into the orchestra," she told him, her voice filled with excitement. Mark grinned from ear to ear. "I knew you would. I'm so proud of you, Lily. You deserve it." The next few weeks flew by as Lily began her preparations for the orchestra. She received her sheet music and started practicing the new pieces they would perform. It was a new challenge, and at first, she felt overwhelmed by the complexity of some of the pieces. But she was determined. She knew she had earned this opportunity, and she wasn't going to let anything stop her. Her father continued to support her, offering quiet encouragement when she needed it most. And when the day came for her first rehearsal with the orchestra, Lily was a bundle of nerves and excitement. She had never played with so many musicians before, and the thought of fitting in with such a talented group made her anxious. But when the rehearsal began, all of her nerves seemed to melt away. The music filled the room, and she could feel the rhythm of the orchestra flowing through her. She wasn't just a lone musician anymore. She was part of something bigger. For the first time in her life, she felt like she truly belonged. As the weeks went on, Lily grew more confident. Her playing became stronger, and the other musicians began to notice her talent. She wasn't just the janitor's daughter anymore. She was a skilled violinist, earning her place in the orchestra with every performance. The nervousness that had once gripped her before performing in front of others was gone. She was no longer afraid of her own potential. Lily had come so far from that quiet girl cleaning the classrooms to a member of the Regional Youth Orchestra. It wasn't just about the music anymore. It was about believing in. As Lily continued to rehearse with the orchestra, she began to feel more at home in this new world. The first few practices had been overwhelming. She was surrounded by talented musicians, some of whom had been playing for years, and at first, she felt out of place. But little by little, the nerves began to fade. The music was what mattered. When she focused on that, everything else seemed to fall into place. The orchestra played a wide variety of pieces, and Lily had to quickly adapt to the different styles. Some songs were fast and energetic, while others were slow and emotional. Each practice session brought new challenges, but it also brought new rewards. She learned to follow the conductor's lead, to listen to the other musicians around her, and to feel the music as it flowed through the group. It was a different kind of playing than she was used to. This was about blending in, becoming part of something bigger, rather than standing out on her own. Mark had been supportive from the very beginning, always cheering her on and reminding her that she belonged here. He would come by after her rehearsals, asking how things were going. He knew how hard she had worked to get here, and he was proud of her every step of the way. Sometimes they would sit together and play a few songs, just for fun. Lily had become a much better violinist in a short time, and it was clear to Mark that her passion for music had only grown. One day, as they were practicing in the music room, Mark asked her something unexpected. "You've come so far, Lily. Have you thought about performing solo, like at a concert?" Lily hesitated. The thought of performing on her own in front of an audience made her nervous. Even with all the progress she had made, the idea of being in the spotlight was still terrifying. "I don't know, Mark," she replied. "I'm not sure if I'm ready for that. I've only just started to feel comfortable with the orchestra." Mark gave her a kind smile. "I get it, but you've got something special, Lily. You've grown so much, and I think people would love to hear you play." Lily thought about it. She hadn't really considered performing alone before, but deep down, she knew Mark was right. She had worked hard to get here, and maybe it was time to take another step. Maybe it was time to share her music with the world, not just as part of a group, but as her own voice too. After a few days of thinking it over, Lily decided to take the leap. She would perform solo at the next school concert. It felt like a big risk, but she knew it was something she had to do for herself. She chose a piece that she had been practicing for a while, a beautiful and challenging violin solo. It wasn't an easy song, but it was meaningful to her. She had poured so much of herself into learning it, and now it was time to show what she had learned. As the day of the concert approached, Lily's nerves began to rise again. It wasn't like playing in front of the orchestra or even at the talent show. This time, she would be alone on stage. She practiced every day, making sure the piece was perfect. She wanted it to be flawless, but she knew it didn't have to be perfect. It just had to come from the heart. The night of the concert, Lily stood backstage, waiting for her turn. Her heart was pounding in her chest, and her hands felt clammy. The sound of the crowd filled the auditorium, and the weight of the moment settled on her shoulders. But then she remembered everything she had been through. The hours of practice, the encouragement from her father, the support from Mark, and the pride she had felt in the orchestra. This was her moment to share her music with the world. When her name was called, Lily took a deep breath and walked onto the stage. The spotlight was bright, but for the first time, it didn't feel like a threat. She stood at the center of the stage, her violin resting in her hands, and she began to play. At first, her fingers were a little shaky, but as she settled into the music, she felt a sense of calm wash over her. The music flowed from her as naturally as if it had always been a part of her. She played the song with all her heart, letting the emotions of the music guide her. Every note felt true, every bow stroke felt right. When she finished, there was a brief moment of silence. Then, the audience erupted into applause. Lily's heart soared. She had done it. She had performed solo, and it had been everything she had hoped for. The applause wasn't as important as the feeling inside her, the sense of accomplishment and pride that filled her chest. Backstage, Mark was waiting for her. "You were amazing, Lily. I knew you could do it." Lily smiled, her eyes shining with happiness. "Thanks, Mark. I couldn't have done it without your support." That night, as Lily walked home, the streets seemed brighter, the world seemed bigger. She had stepped out of her comfort zone and done something she had once thought. The days after the concert were a blur for Lily. The adrenaline from her solo performance still coursed through her, but with each passing day, the reality of what she had accomplished began to sink in. She had stepped out in front of a crowd, faced her fears, and played music from her heart. For someone who had once been invisible in her own school, this was a huge leap forward. At school, the reaction was overwhelmingly positive. Her classmates, who had once seen her as nothing more than the janitor's daughter, were now coming up to her with smiles and congratulations. Even some of the teachers, who had never really noticed her before, started treating her with more respect. It was strange, but in a way, it felt good. It felt like she was finally being seen for who she was, not who people thought she was. Mark, as always, was her biggest cheerleader. He had been there for every step of her journey, from the first time she had picked up the violin to the nerves she'd felt before the concert. He'd seen how hard she had worked, and he was proud of her, but he was also genuinely happy for her. He had watched her transform from a quiet girl who never believed in herself to someone who had found her voice through music. "You were amazing out there, Lily," he said to her one day after school. "I've never seen anyone on a stage like that." Lily smiled, feeling a rush of warmth at his words. "Thanks, Mark. I didn't think I could do it, but I guess I was wrong." Mark grinned. "That's because you've always had it in you. I'm just glad you finally realized it." The more she reflected on everything that had happened, the more grateful she became. She had learned so much, not just about playing the violin, but about herself. She had faced doubts, both from others and from within, but she had pushed through them. Now the possibilities seemed endless. Lily's relationship with her father had also deepened. He had always been supportive, but seeing her perform in the concert had filled him with pride in a way that was hard to describe. He never asked for anything in return for the hard work he put in to support her. All he ever wanted was to see her happy. And now she was doing something she loved, something that brought her joy, and she couldn't wait to share more of her music with him. One evening, after another long practice session, Lily and her father sat together in the living room. Her father had just come home from his shift at the school, and though he was tired, he always made time to listen to her play. "You know, Lily," he said quietly as he sat down across from her, "I've always believed in you. I'm just glad to see you following your dreams." Lily looked up from her violin and smiled at him. "Thanks, Dad. I couldn't have done it without you." Her father's eyes softened, and for a moment, the two of them shared a quiet understanding. He didn't need to say more. He had always believed in her, even when she didn't believe in herself. Now Lily knew that she had the strength to keep going, no matter what challenges lay ahead. The following weeks were filled with new opportunities. Lily was invited to perform at more school events, and the local community began to take notice of her talent. She was even approached by a local music teacher who offered to give her private lessons. It was a chance to improve her skills even further, and Lily eagerly accepted. She realized that while she had come a long way, there was always room to grow. As Lily's confidence continued to rise, she began to think about the future. She had always dreamed of becoming a professional musician, but it seemed like such an impossible goal. Now, however, it didn't feel so far out of reach. She had already proven to herself that she could achieve things she never thought possible. If she could go from being the quiet janitor's daughter to a member of the regional youth orchestra, who knew what else she could accomplish? One afternoon, as Lily sat with her violin in the music room, preparing for her next performance, she thought back to the moment when Ms. Martinez had first suggested she play. It had been a joke at the time, something said in passing, but it had changed the course of her life. If she had let her fear and self-doubt control her, she never would have picked up the violin. She would have continued to be the girl who cleaned the classrooms, invisible to everyone around her. But now she was someone different. She was a musician, and more importantly, she was someone who had learned to believe in herself. She had made her own path, and she wasn't going to stop walking it anytime soon. As the days passed, and her music career started to unfold in ways she had never imagined, Lily knew that the journey was far from over. She was only just getting started, and the world of music was hers to explore. She couldn't wait to see where it would take her next.